We'll now proceed to our panels, and we have a keynote panel here, as you can see, on navigating European policy mechanisms and to end impunity in Palestine. As calls grow across Europe to suspend trade agreements and impose sanctions in response to the genocide in Gaza, this panel will explore how European policy mechanisms can be leveraged or blocked to end impunity and demand accountability. Joining us on stage are our moderator, Nozomi Takahashi, Claudio Francavilla from Human Rights Watch, and Marwa Fatafta from Access Now, who will share insights on the EU's mechanisms, internal divisions, and recent debates on imposing sanctions on Israel. Their expertise will be key to highlight the urgent need for a coordinated advocacy to translate legal rulings into real accountability. Please join me in a big round of applause for our panelists.
Okay, sorry. So after this inspiring talk on justice in action, we will now dive into the sphere of complicity. So, complicity in Palestine is nearly 80 years long, or even more. Israel couldn't have done it alone. Behind this incredible historical injustice is a vested interest of big states and big companies. So today, we will focus on Europe, especially European Union. European Union is not just a bystander. It's an enabler who has been giving diplomatic, political, economic support and shielding Israel from accountability. So we have two great speakers. I'm honored to introduce both of them, Claudio Francavilla and Marwa Fatafta. So welcome and thank you for joining us. Claudio would take us into the labyrinth of European Union, and he will shed light into the mechanism that we could mobilize to achieve certain amount of accountability. So the first speaker, Claudio, would highlight and shed light into the depths of European complicity and what Europe does and fails. Europe is the top trade partner of Israel. So it has an enormous leverage if they want to use. Nearly 1/3 of Israel's trade is depending on Europe. So if it can mobilize some of the leverages, it can have a huge impact. But it has never done so. And why? And these are the questions, one of the questions, and other burning questions Claudio would address. So Claudio, its floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Now it's on, okay. Thanks a lot, Nozomi. Good morning, everyone. Thanks to Tech4Palestine for inviting me and for convening this. It was also great to meet and interact with many of you last night when I also tried to scope a bit what is that could be of help for me to share with tech-savvy, very tech-savvy people like you, from a person who doesn't know how to use a remote control. And I think what is clear is that we all share a very deep frustration in what the EU is not doing, or even at times in what it is doing. But what is perhaps less clear is what the EU should do, why it should do it, why it is not doing it, and how does it work for the EU to do what it must do, and who is blocking that. And now I have about 10 minutes to tell you all that. I will inevitably simplify and skip a few important elements, but I hope that we'll be able to go through and hopefully offer some helpful clarifications about some of the most essential elements and tools that can be helpful for our collective work. Paul earlier spoke about the need to amplify the initiatives. I think it's equally important that we are strategic in the work that we do, that we know what the tools are and how to mobilize them. And events like these are great opportunities to do this. So some of the most powerful tools that the EU has are the suspension of the association agreement, halting arms transfer and transit to Israel, and perhaps we'll hear more today also about the dual use and technology exports, targeted sanctions against individuals and entities, and banning trade with the settlements. Now, as we talk about all these, I will also make the case that in all this, international law is a very powerful ally. And the more you know this, the stronger your arguments will be. I don't want you to love or to worship international law. It has major limitations, but like Noura Erakat says, we can use it as a tool and not as a goal. Whatever your ultimate goal or vision is, international law maybe won't get you exactly there, but it can help you get closer to it. In our case, there are two international law tools that I think that turn the EU tools that I mentioned earlier into legal obligations to act, and that's very powerful. The first one is the Genocide Convention. All EU states are parties to that convention, and I would argue they have a special historic responsibility to uphold that very convention. Now, that convention includes a duty to prevent genocide. The bad news is that many EU states say that Israel is not committing genocide in Gaza. The good news is it doesn't matter. Legally, it doesn't matter. Because legally, the duty to prevent a genocide arises not when you have a ruling that says that there is a genocide. That might take years. But when a state knows, or should normally have known, that there is a serious risk that a genocide might be committed. And by now, that determination has been made by the UN Commission of Inquiry, UN experts, the International Association of Genocide Scholars, humanitarian NGOs, Palestinian NGOs, Israeli NGOs. It's quite clear that we are in a situation where, at the very least, there is a serious risk of genocide. And that triggers the duty to prevent. And the duty to prevent requires each state to adopt all means reasonably available to them to prevent a genocide. And the duty is stronger for countries that have stronger leverage. So, for the US, for Germany, for the UK, is stronger than, with all due respect, for Bhutan or for Botswana. That means, for instance, that they should not export arms to Israel, not on moral grounds, but on legal grounds. And the same goes if you apply the arms trade treaties and the EU arms exports regulation on that. And this paves the way for potential litigation, including personally against the people who literally sign the export licenses that go to Israel. A similar case can be made for the suspension of the association agreement. One can perfectly argue that doing that is one way to implement the duty to prevent a genocide that stems from the UN Genocide Convention. The same goes for targeted sanctions, travel bans, and asset freezes. You may know that some settlers were sanctioned in the past weeks and also last year. And discussions are now ongoing about the possibility to sanction BACBI. I'm personally not particularly enthusiastic about that. I think it's too little, too late, and too racist, given that this is happening only when people from the flotilla were mistreated and not for what he has been doing for years against the Palestinians. But if we had sanctions against IDF generals, Israel Katz, Netanyahu, that would have a different flavor, that would have a different power, but they are nowhere in sight. Then there is the issue of the occupation and the settlements. Here comes the second very powerful legal tool that we have, which is the July 2024 advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice on the legality of the occupation. The ICJ found that Israeli presence in the occupied Palestinian territory, 67 borders. You may like it, you may not like it. This was the temporal reference that was given to the court. The Israeli presence in the occupied Palestinian territory is illegal. Many times we, and certainly the EU and our governments, they tend to focus on the conduct of the occupation. The murders, the demolitions, the apartheid, the torture, the expansion of the settlements, and so on and so forth. And all of these are very serious abuses that we must continue to document and condemn and fight against. But what the court told us is that even if none of that was happening, even if the Israelis were distributing flowers to the Palestinians and not bullets, their presence would still be illegal. And that goes for the new settlements as much for the existing ones. The court in paragraph 270 says that the Israeli settlers must leave. The settlements must be dismantled. The land must be returned to the Palestinians, along with reparations. And that's not just your political view, that's the law. The court also said that all states have an obligation to bring that illegal situation to an end, paragraph 279. And it says that states must not recognize the situation as legal, must not contribute to it, must distinguish in their dealings between Israel and the OPT, and must, and this is a key point, take steps to prevent trade or investment relations that assist in the maintenance of the illegal situation created by Israel in the occupied Palestinian territory. On paper, the EU differentiates. A potato made in Israel is covered by the association agreement between the EU and Israel, and therefore comes to the EU market with no tariffs or with little tariffs. A potato made in the settlements is not covered by the association agreement, and therefore is subject to the WTO tariffs. But that doesn't prevent trade. At best, in theory, at least, it makes it less lucrative, but it does not prevent it. In fact, as we speak, the EU is estimated to import 15 times more products from Israeli settlers than from Palestinian producers in the West Bank. And in the coming days, you will also see a very important report documenting massive systemic fraud, mingling with products made in the settlements that are basically traded in Europe as made in Israel. And of course, paying no tariffs to that. By doing trade and investments with the settlements, the EU is contributing to their economy, is de facto bankrolling the settler violence that it condemns every other day, and is also breaching international law. And all this is happening while the EU continues to repeat the slogan that they support a two-state solution, and they say that the settlements are illegal and an obstacle to the two-state solution, but they continue to trade with them. They trade with the obstacle. So what we need is a full ban of trade with settlements, and regardless of how big or small the volume of trade might be with the settlements, the adoption of that ban would be a very powerful tool also on political grounds. The good news is that there are serious conversations ongoing at the EU level right now among the member states. There are 4 states already who have adopted a national ban, Spain, the Netherlands, Slovenia, and Ireland, or are just about to. Belgium is expected to follow shortly, but the Commission has yet to propose regulation to ban for an EU-wide ban. And note, a ban of trade with settlements is a best-case scenario for Israel, because one could argue that any trade with Israel contributes to the occupation, given that the occupation is fully state-backed, not the initiative of some paramilitary rogue actors. You can find some papers from Halak, one of the sanctioned NGOs from the US, that makes extremely good arguments in that direction. So at this point, I must conclude with some technical notes on all of those tools that I mentioned. Targeted sanctions require unanimity among the member states. It's been reached for settlers. It's been reached for settler organizations. It may be reached for Ben-Gvir, but that's really it. Too many EU states do not want to sanction democratically elected of officials or an army defending Israel from terrorists. On arms, EU-wide embargo would require unanimity, but each member state can do their own ban, can decide unilaterally whether they want to export or allow the transit of arms. When it comes to the association agreement, the suspension of the whole deal, which is what the European Citizen Initiative, that probably you all know, if you don't, please sign and share it, which asks for, that measure would require, again, unanimity among the 27 states, and that's very hard. The suspension of its trade pillar only, which is what is on the table, a proposal from the Commission, would require qualified majority among the member states. That is 15 out of 27 of the EU states, representing at least 65% of the EU population. And that's a problem, because that means that countries with a large population, like Germany and Italy, have a much heavier weight than Malta or Cyprus. And in fact, they are blocking. They are not the only ones against the measure. I can mention the Czech Republic, Austria, Bulgaria, Croatia, Cyprus, Greece, Lithuania. But if Italy or Germany flipped, we would probably get the numbers for the suspension. A ban on trade with settlements requires qualified majority. The Commission has not proposed it yet. There has not been a vote. Member states are pushing for it. It's work in progress. Once again, getting Italy to, especially to openly call for it would be extremely beneficial. Germany is unlikely to support, but after the humiliating defeat that they just had for a seat in the UN Security Council, there is a lot of important conversations that are ongoing even there, including from parliamentarians. And they know that their position on Israel over the past few years has been a decisive factor for their loss. And I think I will stop here. I know this was a lot. I'm probably over time. I hope this was helpful, and I'm happy to continue the conversation, clarify anything, and to learn from you over the course of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claudio. Now I have the honor to introduce the next speaker, Marwa. She is a Policy and Advocacy Director at Access Now, sorry. So she will just dive into the details and facts and deep complexity of EU, especially in the field of security and surveillance, where Israeli military industry complex is entangled with all EU institutions. So thank you, Marwa, joining us. Floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Okay. Sabah al-khair. Good morning. It's good to be among you all. I should say on a personal note, I'm not a morning person. You don't want to talk to me before noon, so I'll have to rely on my laptop. But on a more serious note, I think when we talk about accountability for Palestine, we must highlight, expose, and challenge and confront Israel's surveillance industry. And I will talk about 3 ways in which the EU is not only complicit, but also a partner in building Israel's surveillance and war machine. I think I'm speaking to a very well-informed crowd, so I will not delve into the ways in which Israel surveils Palestinians, but it suffices to say that from biometric surveillance, spyware, to drones, Palestinians have become one of the most surveilled populations of the world. And these technologies of violence are not only central to how occupation, apartheid, and genocide is administered and even optimized, but they're also the engine of Israel's economy and foreign policy agenda. Israel's global image as a startup nation rests on an extremely ugly and bloody reality in which Palestinians' bodies, lives, and communities become testing ground for Israeli technologies. And as an Israeli tech industry figure said it, Israel's unique advantage lies in the fact that it innovates while it fights. And these same technologies are increasingly being sold, exported, funded, and deployed across Europe and the world. Actually, a couple of days ago, the Israeli Ministry of Defense celebrated breaking a new record in its defense exports for 2025, jumping 30% in its defense exports from last year, reaching a new record of 19.2 billion in weapons and defense deals, nearly double what they were 5 years ago and 4 times what they were a decade ago. And Israel Katz, the Israeli defense minister, of course, they all openly boast about how their military operations and military aggressions in, and they name Gaza, Iran, Yemen, and Lebanon, have put them at this military advantage. And I quote, it speaks to the tremendous respect and confidence the global community has placed in Israel's defense establishment. Now, Europe has the lion's share of those exports. According to the Israeli Defense Ministry's figures, they account for, or the total of the exports, Europe accounts for 36%. We know that, of course, the EU is Israel's largest trading partner. It is also one of the primary markets sustaining Israel's defense industry. Chief among these exports are Israeli drones that man now the Mediterranean to crack down on vulnerable migrants and asylum seekers that are coming to Europe seeking safety and a new life. According to some reports, Frontex drone fleet is entirely Israeli-made. It could also be that most of it is indeed Israeli exported or imported. These include drones from Israeli companies like the Israeli Aerospace Industries, which said that this year or last year has been their best year ever in terms of drones exports. And also Al-Bayt Systems, which describes its drones as the backbone of the IDF. There are also some startups that made news during the genocide for being deployed for the first time in Gaza, one of which is called Extend. Those have also entered now the European market with tactical drones closed for close-range surveillance and interception. Another area where we see strong trades, where Europe is a huge fan of Israeli products, that is commercial spyware. Commercial spyware manufactured and developed by ex-Israeli veterans and intelligence officers. I'm sure all of you have heard of the infamous NSO group and its spyware Pegasus. It's been used to surveil human rights defenders, journalists, even politicians and members of the European Parliament in several European countries. Those include Hungary, Poland, Greece, Spain, and Italy. According to media reports, Hungary has built its surveillance apparatus using Israeli technology, an Israeli company called Cobwebs, which sells a surveillance tool that tracks hundreds of millions of people using data harvested from their smartphones, apps without their consent or knowledge. Another scandal in Greece, known now as the Watergate, there is a predator spyware manufactured by an Israeli company called Intellexa that has been used to spy on journalists, ministers, even military officials. Italy is the same. They've used another technology founded by, or spyware founded by former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak. The company is called Paragon Solutions, and the technology has been used also to surveil journalists, migrant rescue workers, and civil society actors. And I have to note that EU member states are not only just importing and using these technologies, but they also facilitate the illicit exports of spyware. They support with export and marketing license for spyware. Other countries, I think Cyprus, Greece, their home also to spyware companies and offer them favorable tax arrangements, fast-track citizenship, or even discrete banking services. And even European states that are so vocal in condemning Israeli crimes are amongst the biggest buyers of Israeli spyware tech. Spain is one of them, where over 60 Catalan journalists and lawyers and politicians have been spied on or hacked using NSO Group. All right, I have 5 minutes. Okay, I'll try my best. Have been hacked using Pegasus. Another area where the EU is highly complicit is not only with the import, but also using European public money to fund Israel's war machine. Israeli companies developing surveillance drone technologies have received millions of euros through EU research programs, including Horizon Europe, the European Innovation Council, the European Defense Fund. For instance, I found that the European Defense Fund awarded millions of euros to Israeli European Industries, a major drone manufacturer, which is involved in at least EU defense projects. Also, Horizon Europe is now granting this new drone company that deployed its technologies for the first time during the genocide, Extend. They received 50,000 euros to develop a drone system. Rafael, another Israeli weapons company, received funding. In some cases, European institutions become even investors, not only funders, but also investors in Israeli companies holding stakes in such companies. And for instance, part of the EU Horizon Fund, the European Innovation Council, the EIC, they offer small and medium-sized businesses part of its grants, but also part of it equity funding, with the business model that once these companies become successful, then they sell their shares and so they make profits. And in 2024, 9 Israeli startup companies have been awarded a total of 108 million euros from this accelerator program, ranking Israel third for the number of companies receiving this funding, following Germany and France. And also the funding goes sometimes to Israeli venture capitalist companies that they, in their turn, also invest in Israeli surveillance and drones companies developed by ex-Israeli veterans. Another area I want to quickly go over, and I think it's less discussed, and I would love to see much more attention, because this is an area where we as a public can also actively get involved in, and that is the EU's complicity in normalizing and even rewarding Israel's systematic and invasive surveillance practices. And here I want to talk about the GDPR. During the genocide, even after the revelations that came around Israel's deployment of AI to kill Palestinians en masse, the EU decided, and the European Commission specifically decided to announce or confirm that Israel has the same level of protections for personal data as Europe under the GDPR, granting or maintaining Israel's GDPR adequacy status. What does that mean? It means that there is a free flow of transfer of personal data between Israel and the EU under data protection frameworks. And that means, or the way Israel, of course, has exploited that, in addition to the economic benefits of Israel being a tech startup nation, we know that Israel actually used data centers in the Netherlands and Ireland to store massive amounts of surveillance data collected on Palestinians, including okay, I always mess up the statistics, but 1 million 1 million intercepted recorded phone calls an hour. And those records of people's communications, phone calls, messages, have been used to track and target Palestinians using AI. And also in the West Bank, according to reports, they have been used to blackmail Palestinians or even justify their killing after the fact. And to add insult to injury, in September in 2024, Israel joined the European Council's first global treaty on AI, next to the UK and the US. And this treaty establishes rules and obligations for the responsible use of AI with a focus on safeguarding human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. These three areas, trade, research and funding, and thirdly, the normalization through global treaties or regulations, are areas in which we can, as Claudio mentioned, we can try to expose but also challenge and confront complicity between Israel or complicity of Europe in Israel's crimes and occupation. And to me, ending impunity means that we also have to challenge Israel's global surveillance industry that profits from Palestinian oppression. So it's not only a question of how can we hold Israel accountable, but also it's a question around who builds the databases and the data centers, who writes and develops the softwares, who funds the research, who stores the data, and who profits from this ecosystem of oppression and violence. And I hope that we can explore this today together. I have later a workshop, if I can plug in a shameless announcement, at 4 p.m., where we're going to talk more about these issues and explore together ways we could attack. Thank you.